Breaking news on NFL Live out of Miami. Dan Graziano, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, the Dolphins taking care of a lot of business today, including releasing Tyreek Hill, veteran wide receiver who missed most of last season with a significant knee injury. Tyreek Hill was due around $36 million in salary and bonuses this season. So this was always a likely outcome. $16 million of that would have become guaranteed if he was still on the roster on March 14th. So the Dolphins getting ahead of that, also releasing defensive end Bradley Chubb, among other players today. They'll take some dead money, about $28 million for Tyreek Hill, but they're obviously moving on. New GM, new head coach, a new era there in Miami.
Whole lot going on with the Dolphins on this Monday. After being traded to Miami March of 2022, Tyreek Hill posted all-pro seasons in his first 2 years in Miami. Hill then saw a pretty massive drop-off in production in 2024, ranking outside the top 20 in both receptions and yards. Last season, Hill suffered a dislocated knee and torn ACL in Week 4 against the Jets. Welcome in to NFL Live. I'm Courtney Cronin. We've got a full house on this Monday. Brooke Pryor, Mina Kimes, Sam Acho, and Dan Graziano. So we know the Dolphins have been very active today. A lot of spring cleaning, I think is what we call that, down in Miami. They cut ties with linebacker Bradley Chubb, offensive lineman James Daniels, wide receivers Nick Westbrook-Akine, and of course, Tyreek Hill. So Acho, let's focus on the big name here. Your reaction was what to the news of Hill being released?
It just reminds me that the NFL is actually a business, and it's about your production. What have you done for me lately? Well, lately, last year, Tyreek Hill was injured for the majority of the season. He's going to be rehabbing and recovering in this offseason. The year before had one of his worst seasons, at least from a statistical standpoint. And so as much as you get excited about, man, this is my team or my year or have this contract, when a new owner comes in, or in this case specifically, a new general manager, a new head coach, it goes back to the business side of it. Now, the question is, with Tyreek Hill and his health and his age, will he get back to the production where he was arguably the best receiver in all of football? Jury's still out on that, but it just shows me that it is a business in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. There's a lot of questions around Hill right now. 32 years old, or going to be 32 next season, coming off of the ACL. Game is really predicated on elite speed, so there's questions about whether or not he'll be able to hit that speed moving forward as he ages, obviously. Brings some baggage off the field as well. He's not the right player for every team. I think for teams that are in the market, though, for a deep threat receiver who don't want to compete for Alec Pierce, who's a guy I'm going to talk about later, he does make sense. And the other thing I'll note is the injury did, of course, happen at the very beginning of the season. So that's a benefit to him and his acquiring team as well. And as Sam put, he's not that far removed from being very productive. So even if he is 70% of the player he was a couple of years ago, he still brings, I think, some value to certain teams in the NFL.
And teams will want to look at him as a potential free agent. Mina, you mentioned the timeline of when he will be ready to play potentially in the 2026 season. So, Brooke, let's talk landing spots now for Tyreek Hill. Where makes the most sense?
I mean, look, the Kansas City Chiefs are already getting the band back together, bringing back offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. So why not also explore bringing back wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who helped them win a Super Bowl? The Chiefs, yes, have won a Super Bowl since they traded Tyreek Hill in 2022, but they have not found that consistency on offense without him. Now, part of the reason that they decided to trade him in 2022 is because they saw what could come down the pipeline as far as an extension that could get contentious. All of these things, they felt like they could get a good value from him, trading him away. But look, I think that Tyreek Hill coming back would be a lot different than the Tyreek Hill that left. I think that he's in a different spot leverage-wise. I also think that if he comes back, he has to be okay with being part of the ensemble and not being the lead singer. That's what he wanted before in Kansas City. So if he can accept that role, he makes all the sense in the world. He has chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. He knows Eric Bieniemy's system. He knows Andy Reid's system. He's familiar to everyone there. And if not there, keep an eye on another AFC West team, the Chargers, or perhaps I could be covering him in Pittsburgh. They badly need a wide receiver too. That's an option.
Okay, so Miami hard at work clearing up cap space. Graz, you mentioned the $16 million on Tyreek Hill's contract would become guaranteed on the third day of the league year. Bradley Chubb was also released. He had a cap hit of about $31 million for 2026. So that brings the question now to Tua Tagovailoa. Is it possible that we could be hearing some decision on the quarterback down in Miami, Graz?
It's possible, Courtney, but it's not as urgent for them to do it soon because Tua Tagovailoa's $54 million salary for this coming year is already fully guaranteed. So if they cut him, they'll have to pay that regardless. There's not a date at which it activates like there was with Tyreek Hill. A third day of the league year, another $3 million for 2027 becomes guaranteed, but that's not likely to deter them when they're already at 54. The Dolphins would like to be able to trade Tua Tagovailoa and get someone to help them defray the cost. Trading him, they'd incur $45 million in dead money instead of the $99 million it would cost them in dead money to release him. So they'll continue to explore those options. They may have to pick up a chunk of the salary to make a trade work. Unclear whether they'll be willing to do that and to what extent. So this could drag a little while as the Dolphins still retain at least some hope that they might be able to get something in return for Tua Tagovailoa rather than just cutting him loose.
First big event of the NFL offseason kicks off tomorrow from February 17th through March 3rd. Teams can utilize the franchise tag on pending free agents. Plenty of big decisions to be made. Let's start down in the Big D. Graz, what do we need to know about the Cowboys' plans headed into Tuesday?
I would expect them at some point during the franchise tag window to use the franchise tag on wide receiver George Pickens. The Cowboys are open to the idea of a long-term deal with Pickens, but it's complicated. They're already paying CeeDee Lamb $34.5 million a year. Do you want to go over 30 for two receivers? Franchise tag come in around 28 and will allow them time to work on a new long-term deal if that's what both sides want. Tight end Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. He's a candidate for the franchise tag, would come in around $16.5 million, would put him in the top 5 highest paid tight ends. You know, he's been inconsistent in terms of health and production. New GM, new team president, new head coach in Atlanta may want to take a fresh look at him before committing long term. I don't think anybody would be surprised to see Kyle Pitts get tagged. I do think it would be a surprise to see the Cincinnati Bengals tag edge rusher Trey Hendrickson for $30.2 million. Remember last year, they didn't want to give him a longer-term contract extension. It got contentious. They ultimately reached a settlement that got him in uniform for the 2025 season, but he's turning 32 this offseason. And I think the expectation is that while the Bengals do need all kinds of help on defense, they try to go younger and likely move on from Trey Hendrickson, who would then become a very interesting free agent option for a lot of teams.
Yeah, in Cincinnati, the main question for the Bengals this offseason is how do you fix a defense that reached historic lows in 2025? Graz just mentioned it. A key part of that's going to be what to do with defensive end Trey Hendrickson, who would arguably be the top free agent should he hit free agency. Cincinnati projected to have over $73 million in cap space. The Bengals missed the playoffs for a third straight season, something that does not sit well with wide receiver Jamar Chase. He had some pretty pointed comments about wherein this fix lies. Chase told Sports Illustrated's Russell Heltman, quote, "I mean, everybody pretty much knows what we need. I've said it out in the media. All I've got to do is sit back and watch. I can't control that, so all I got to do is control my production. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just stating my opinion on what I think we need. So, you know, I sit back, let the organization do what they do, and I just got to play and do the rest. Let his play do the rest." Brooke, stop me if I sound like a broken record here because we go through this song and dance every single offseason, it seems, with the Cincinnati Bengals. The offense is always the focus, but the play never makes up for the defense. So knowing all of that, how should Cincinnati approach their offseason to-do list? Because it's lengthy.
It feels like it's Groundhog Day. I know that usually happens in Pennsylvania, but it's happening in Ohio this year. I mean, they have got to nail the draft this year. They have not done well with their first-round picks. Last year, they went with Shamar Stewart, who had a prolonged contract dispute with the Bengals over Bengals-specific language in his contract. That then led to him reporting to camp late. That put him behind the 8 ball. He gets injured. He was not a factor last year at all. That can't happen again this year. The Bengals had the 10th overall pick this year. It means they're going to come pretty close to having their pick of defensive talent available. They could go with Caleb Downs. They could go with Reuben Bain Jr. There are so many options, but they have got to get it right. That is something they can control. Get the draft right, get your defense right, because we saw how worn down Joe Burrow seemed at the end of last year. I've talked to people in Cincinnati. They don't necessarily think that the pressure is getting to him, internal or external, but I think that if there's another season of feeling like he is just helpless and there's nothing he can do to get this team over the hump, I think that pressure may become more and more real.
And he's got to stay healthy, too. Burrow does. That's another piece of it. But just going to that defense, to the point of they brought in Al Golden, a defensive coordinator who was at Notre Dame and who was took them to a national championship. They thought it would be a big-time improvement, and it wasn't. It was still one of the worst defenses the Bengals had in all of the NFL. Now, in the second half of the season, they were significantly better post-bye week, but it was just not good enough, put it that way, quite simply. And so the hope, goal, and dream would be that in another year with Al Golden, some of the young talent will be able to understand the defense. But it's not just the defense, it's also the health of your quarterback and some of the star players. And so I understand what Jamar Chase is saying and leaning towards, fixing the defense. I don't know if Trey Hendrickson is going to be a part of that, but it's also the health of your star quarterback.
Yeah. You know, Sam, you said something there that I think was kind of slept on last year, which I'm not going to lie to you and say the Bengals defense was good. Or even above average. But there was some improvement in the second half of the season under their defensive coordinator, Al Golden, particularly with the younger players. In fact, from week 10 on, statistically, this defense was actually average in both EPA per play and success rate. And they faced the Bills and the Patriots and the Ravens a couple of times. And the thing I would mention there is watching them, you did see some improvement from young players. I thought Dax Hill, the young corner who, has played different positions but really settled into that outside corner spot. I thought he was a bright spot. Demetrius Knight, their linebacker, you saw some success as a blitzer. They need to build on that because they have not had that young core of talent that has allowed them to spend so much on offense. The thing I do think, though, they have to figure out how to address in some way is pass rush. I don't think Trey Hendrickson is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal. They must find a way to get to the quarterback because thus far, the players they have drafted for that purpose have really not paid off.
Brooke,